Photoshop CC 2019 introduces the brand new frame tool. It's the newest addition to the toolbar. You can see it here. This is the frame tool. You can select it by clicking on it or pressing K on the keyboard. The frame tool allows you to create placeholder images, and you can easily replace the contents in the future. If you've ever used a frame tool in Adobe InDesign, then you're probably already familiar with the function. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you two examples so that you understand why you would want to use this tool. But before we get into that, I'm just going to start with a very basic example so that you understand how the tool works. Then we'll worry about why you want to use it. In this image, I have a blank layer, a fill layer for a background so I can change the color if I want to, and then a pixel layer and a smart object. So I'm going to disable all the layers and then just work with my background and this blank layer. Then with the frame tool selected, you can look at the options bar and decide if you're going to create a rectangular frame or an elliptical frame. Let's start with a rectangular frame. So I'll select that. Then I'm just going to click and drag in the canvas. Notice that in the layers panel, now I have a new layer type. This is a frame layer. I can tell that it's a frame layer because I can see this icon here on the bottom right that indicates that this is a frame. It's simply a square with an X on it, which looks a lot like the frame that I have here. So this frame is an image placeholder. And what that means is that I can go into my libraries panel and I can click and drag any image I want onto it. Notice that the image was automatically resized to fit the height of the frame. Notice the layers panel. There's this white focus, this white outline that is really important when working with a frame layer because you can either affect the frame, the content inside of the frame, or if I hold shift and click on both, I can adjust both at the same time. So first I'm just going to select the content, the image. If I press Ctrl T, Command T to transform, I can of course move it and transform it. If I click outside the bounding box, I commit the changes. You can see the outline of the image here. If I wanted to fit the image onto the frame again, I cannot do it automatically. I have to do it by hand, so I would have to press Ctrl T, Command T to transform and try to match it. Also, I can click on the frame. Notice the white outline on the frame. Then I can click and drag on the corner handles to adjust the shape of the frame. If I hold shift and click on the frame and then the content, the image, and press Ctrl T, Command T to transform, I can scale both at the same time. Frames were designed to be used with images and smart objects. Currently, the content is a smart object, but it's actually linked to the cloud, which is why you see this icon here. I'm going to delete this frame. Then I'm going to select the elliptical frame, click and drag to create one, and notice that we now have a circle. If I disable the background, enable this pixel layer, I can click and drag it onto the frame and notice that it gets placed inside of it. Also notice that this time it was not automatically resized because we brought it in from the layers panel. If I were to bring it from an external source like the libraries panel or a file in my computer, it would resize it accordingly. So just note the difference. Also notice another thing that happened. This became a smart object, which means that we can transform it non-destructively. So I can scale it way down if I want to, and then scale it up again, and I will not get any pixelation because smart objects allow me to work non-destructively. That also means that I can double click on this smart object and it opens up in a new tab, and I can make an adjustment layer like a gradient map adjustment layer, and I'll change it to a different color just so that you could see. And I can close it, save it, and it gets applied onto my frame. I can also, of course, use a filter, so maybe filter, stylized, find edges, and here it is. Here's my find edges filter. And of course, I can click and drag it into the trash icon to delete it. So I'm just making it clear that it's a regular smart object inside of that frame now. Also, you can work with a smart object directly. So I have this smart object here. If I double click on it, you can see what it looks like. I have an adjustment layer. I have this layer and the background. Another way of creating a frame is by simply clicking and dragging over an image or a smart object, and that creates the frame. So frames only work with images, smart objects, not vectors, not text layers, or any other kind of layer. Also, if you don't have a frame selected and you have the frame tool selected, you can click once to select the frame, double click to select the contents. Notice the white outline, the focus. When I double clicked on it, it moved over onto the content. When the content is selected, if I double click on it again, it selects both the content and the frame, and I can adjust them accordingly. Also, if I have the content selected, I can select the frame by clicking once on the outline, and that selects the frame, and I can adjust the frame if I need to. So this is just a basic example of how the frame tool works. So what I'm going to do now is show you a couple projects that will demonstrate how this tool works. So I'm going to go into this example. And in the old days, if you're designing a website or any type of design, sometimes the images will not be ready in time. So you might be waiting for a photographer, for a designer, or somebody to create an image. So what you would do is just create a placeholder image. So in this case, I have these images as placeholders. And what you would do is delete these images and replace them with the final images when they came in. So what I'll do now is just delete this group because we don't need it. And what the frame tool is designed to do is to create those placeholder images, but then make them smart so that you could easily update the content. So I'm going to click on the rectangular option, and I'm going to click and drag to make my frame. There it is. I can give it a name if I want to, and I'm just going to create all these frames, and that's all I need to do. Now, instead of deleting the frames and replace it with the final content, I can actually drag and drop the final content onto the frames. So